headset set up here. Slight difference of location today. Oh my god, did the sun really have to shine in my face like the moment I started streaming? That's ludicrous. That's a disgusting amount of sunlight there. Let me just move over here. Is that slightly better? I think that's slightly better. So anyway, it's been a few days since I spoke to you, so I thought we should probably recap on a few things. Now, I will say that I've sort of gleaned the headlines from today that we've had quite a few announcements to do with the Tory manifesto and big amounts of tax cuts. I saw just before I went live 17 billion worth of tax cuts or something like that. This particular stream isn't going to be to talk about that because that's very fresh. I've not really seen much about it. This is more just recapping some stuff from the election over the last few days, but we will get on to that in a future stream, don't you worry. So the debate, the leaders' debate from a few nights ago, with the various sort of either party leaders or deputies or what have you. I watched that. It was kind of as you might have expected, really, which was sort of like you had Farage and then you had everybody else. But also the sort of the to and fro between Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt was quite interesting, obviously being the Labour and Conservative representatives. Penny, in the end, speaking about Sunak leaving the D-Day commemorations early, said something like, of course the Prime Minister was wrong, but he apologised, so, you know. And we had been sort of saying, I wonder how she's going to play it, how she's going to kind of walk that line. And obviously, because she says, of course, the Prime Minister's wrong, then any quotes about the occasion to do with Penny Mordaunt later end up being Penny Mordaunt said the Prime Minister was wrong. And it's like, well, her and pretty much everyone else in the country. But I think she sort of, you know, she was firm enough in saying he shouldn't have done it, but she wasn't going to sort of batter him with it and sort of emphasise the fact he'd apologised and tried to move on. But to be honest, I didn't much enjoy seeing Penny Mordaunt versus Angela Rayner. I didn't think. I think Rayner's a lot better at speaking in different contexts than she is in a debate context, and Penny Mordaunt wasn't really amazing either. But I'm sure at one point it kind of felt like it was descending between like the two of them, literally talking over each other a lot. Then again, you had that between Nigel Farage and everyone else, and vice versa as well. Now, I think there was a poll done at the end of the debate which said, I think something like 25% of respondents thought that Farage had won. I think behind that was Angela Rayner, or maybe just shy of 20%. And then behind that was none of them won. And then obviously everyone else in much lesser amounts. And I'd probably agree with that. I think that Farage, obviously being Farage, kind of gave the best performance in terms of his delivery of what he was saying, in terms of the emphasis on what he was saying, in terms of the energy being put into what he was saying, not necessarily commenting on the content of what he was saying. But who else was decent? I feel like I can't remember their names unfortunately, but the Green woman or the Lib Dem woman weren't too bad, but you're kind of grading on a little bit of a curve of all of them are a bit unexciting and uninteresting for the most part, really. Comments in the chat here we have Lee Hallam says hi Swiss, Apollo TD says hi, Pterodax says Reform, Lib Dems and Greens were the best. The real debate was between those three. Well, all right then. Pterodax seems to broadly agree with what I'd picked up on then. Labour Conservative was uni-party bickering, Plaid was a non-entity, and SNP was a broken record. Yeah, maybe it's my Englishness shining through a little bit, but Plaid and SNP, I was just kind of like, why am I listening to you? Then again, I suppose I live in the country that doesn't vote for Plaid or the SNP anyway, do I? But yeah, I think Farage probably came out best in that debate. Now, here's the thing. Actually, yeah, I should probably caveat that quite strongly when I say came out the best. What I mean by that is, I think he played very well to who his audience out there watching the debate was. The people who are already going to vote Reform, the people who might be on the fence between Reform and the Tories, or not voting and Reform, or even Reform and Labour, or what have you. I think to that particular constituent of people, he delivered his message pretty much exactly as he wanted to, and we've seen that in previous years. I think the 2015 leaders debate, Farage was on a similar track. The room that he was in wasn't getting an awful lot of applause from the people who were actually watching, and indeed it seemed to be quite a hostile audience to him. Probably if it was representative of all the different parties that were there, then obviously there's a much bigger chunk of people that are going to be left of centre or progressive than the types that would listen to Farage. But I suppose from his point of view, did he do better than Penny Mordaunt? The answer is obviously yes. So Farage and Reform will be happy. I suppose for that matter, then, when it comes to Angela Rayner, did she do better than Penny Mordaunt? Again, there's a slight bias here because I'd obviously like Labour to do better than the Tories, but I feel that she did. Maybe not by as large a margin as Farage did, but nonetheless, I think that if I had to pick between the two of them, I probably would have said Rayner. Lee Hallam says the problem with nationalists in the debate is the others can't challenge them over their local records. I don't know if generally speaking, I agree. I think the only exception to that is whenever I think the running of the NHS in Wales is brought up. Oh shoot, no, never mind. That doesn't really apply, does it? Because yeah, you're talking about the nationalist parties. I was thinking about the Tories always kind of go on about the NHS in Wales when they want to get one over on Labour there, but it's not as if Welsh Labour was there being represented. It was Angela Rayner for Labour at large. So I can't remember if Welsh NHS was mentioned or not. But yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think unfortunately, given that it was a few days ago now, I can't remember too many specifics from the debate itself, other than my overall impression of who I think kind of fared the best out of them. The other thing that I found very interesting is like this just continued discussion about reform in the polls, the potential for them crossing over with the Tories at some point. I read your comment, Lee, that you left on one of my streams recently about when the threshold was that they could start racking up a decent number of MPs. I think I'd quoted it as being 30% or so. You'd said that you'd read it as somewhere being closer to 20. Which does seem more achievable. At the very least, I've gone back and looked at the 2015 general election results, and I believe, if I'm quoting it correctly, UKIP in that election got 12.9% share of the vote. And if I'm to ask myself a simple question of, come this general election, do I think Reform will get more than 12.9% of the vote? I'd say, yeah. I think that's a pretty good level to say they could probably get a bit higher than that. I think they'll get more votes than the Liberal Democrats. I think they'll be the third largest party in terms of votes. It would really take some. I don't think we're there at the moment where Reform would get more actual votes than the Conservatives. I think we're still some ways off there. But Reform maybe getting, I don't know, 4 or 5 million votes or something doesn't seem completely inconceivable to me. Tories definitely dropping below 10 million votes, probably down to 9 or 8 million. That's kind of the levels that I think I'm at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting poll watching, and not everything has it as close between Reform and the Tories. I think there was one poll sort of famously that had them 2 points between each other. Others have a much wider gap. But over the course of the past week or so, we've seen an overall trend of Reform catching up to the Tories there. If you pop the latest YouGov poll into electoral calculus, Reform get 5 seats on 17%, says Lee. Pterodax says, I might need to dust off my semi-ironic prediction of 2019 for a Lib Dem reform two-party system. Claire King adds Lib Dem official opposition incoming. Speaking of the Lib Dems, because I was going to get onto them, I know that they had their manifesto launch on Monday, and I did have a quick little glance at sort of some of the policy areas and some of the things that they were saying. I know that most heavily, sort of the thing that they were pushing forwards was programs for NHS and social care. Although, as far as media reporting on the Lib Dems went, it seemed that they were sort of very much focused on whether or not they wanted to rejoin the EU or not. That seemed to be a few questions that Ed Davey was asked at the event itself. And, don't get me wrong, I was a Leave voter. Those of you that watched the channel over the many years know that I felt rather passionately about the fact that needed to be seen through, given it was what was voted for. And I most certainly was not happy with the old Lib Dem position in 2019 of let's just scrap Brexit altogether without even having another vote. I thought that was profoundly undemocratic. But I think the Lib Dems, having accepted that things have moved on somewhat, and certainly that didn't do them any favours as an electoral strategy. It seems that when they're asked about the EU question now, they seem to sort of say, "Well, obviously we're a pro-EU party. Obviously we want to rejoin the EU at some point. That is a goal of ours, but it's not our immediate thing that we're pushing for. In the short term, we'd like to repair relations with the EU, possibly look to joining the single market at some point in time, which I find uh, with my deep Brexiter instincts largely more palatable than the Lib Dems of 5 years ago or so. So on that basis, I'm happy enough with that answer. The Lib Dems aren't going to get anywhere near government in the next election. So hey, if they're saying they're putting that on the back burner for the time being and actually focusing on some other policies, social care, sewage, proportional representation, of course, that's an old favourite. Then yeah, I'd probably need to look at their manifesto in more detail in order to really sort of analyze what I think about it and comparing it to the other parties' manifestos when they come out. But impression I was left with overall, I just kind of went, yeah, this seems like a Lib Dem manifesto. Certainly with some focus on social care. That seems to be an area that most of the other main parties don't seem to be tackling too much. So seems all right in that area, I suppose. Other stuff doesn't really seem like they've got much of a plan for immigration necessarily. But I probably wouldn't have expected that either. Lee Hallam says they want to win pro-Brexit Southwest seats, Lib Dem stroke Reform coalition to get PR with a winking face. Well, this is where we are, which is where we always are, mind you. It's always every party other than the big two that want proportional representation. But yeah, Lib Dems, Reform, Greens, George Galloway's Workers' Party, I imagine. Your SNPs, your Plies, your everybody else. It's always very much Labour and the Tories that aren't in favour because the turkeys don't vote for Christmas. As much as many Labour Party members would probably like the Tories to go down that route, but would like the Tories to go down that route. I caught myself there. Like Labour to go down that route. There we are. Yeah, so I'm going to be interested to see what's actually come out from Rishi Sunak in terms of tax, because I've heard that it's been a real sort of kitchen sink set of proposals. Again, I'm just plucking little phrases that I've read from headlines on Google here. But that's why I sort of wanted to preface the stream by saying I know that this is the latest thing to happen. I've not really looked into it much yet, so I need a proper chance to do that, and we'll be able to compare a few of the manifestos by the end of the week, won't we? In the meantime, yeah, Ed Davey, off to I think after he did his manifesto launch, he went and rode a roller coaster, and he even said something like, "Right, well, there we go, done that, blah blah blah. I'm off to get on a roller coaster." And straight away, the commentator on Sky News or whatever it was said something like, and I wonder which roller coaster Ed Davey will go on. Will it be Alton Towers? Will it be somewhere else?" And I thought, oh yeah, this is the level we're at, really, isn't it? But oh yeah, and everything was fully costed. There was many, 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 many mentions of it all being fully costed in this presentation. Of course, it's always all manifestos are fully costed, don't you know? If you're the party presenting it, you say it's fully costed at the very least. And the other thing that I noticed as well was that there was a couple of times that Davey talking about the state of the country, talking about things that had happened with the Tories or this, that, and the other, and he employed the phrase, "How sad is that?" in response to it. And you hear it once, whatever, but I picked up on it at least twice, possibly more times, where something, something, something. How sad is that? The rivers are full of raw sewage. How sad is that? No one, all that sort of thing. So that felt like a little bit of a meme. I think Ed Davey is definitely the meme of this election. Although then again, quite a few of the parties have strong social media games at the moment. I think the Lib Dems have always had a very good sort of online meme game and social media and all the rest of it. I think they've had some quite funny TikTok videos or so, I've been told, as a person who doesn't really tick, nor do I talk. Labour's been okay. I don't know about the Tories. It's probably cringe, but then again, I'm a bit biased. I think Reform's stuff has been very slick. I've seen a couple of videos that Reform have put out, and it's very very high quality cameras, very snazzy, snappy editing, and all sorts of stuff. So they've obviously got someone working on their stuff who knows what they're doing. Um, Let me read a few comments from here. So let's see. I swear, if Labour don't build all of Northern Powerhouse Rail, what is the point of them? They'll just be another London-centric party, says Apollo TD. Heath Starmer says Sunak must resign. Every day he doesn't, people will die starting tonight. Claire King says, Swiss, have you registered to vote? Do you recommend others to register? I am registered to vote. I voted in the local elections earlier this year, and I'm still registered for that point. I've got a passport as my form of ID. And of course, I would strongly recommend to all people to go register to vote. Obviously, even if you are not especially passionate about the options in front of you to vote for, even if you're not especially made your mind up about how you're going to vote. In a sense, I'm still deciding a little bit. I'm open to the idea of voting Labour, of spoiling my ballot. I've had a little look at the list of people running in my area. I might have a look at one of the independents who's there. There's even a really weird little bit of me that started thinking, oh, maybe the Lib Dems and the Greens, quite possibly. But we'll see. We'll see. I think at the moment the core centre of gravity for how I'm likely to vote is probably still Labour. But I've just found myself since the election campaign started going, oh, but Swiss, you don't have to vote Labour in this election. For a couple of years now, I've been saying to myself, oh, vote Labour to get the Tories out. But when I look at the polls and I look at the fact that my seat is already a Labour seat, it's already a Labour seat. And obviously, versus 2019, the swing for Labour one way and the Tories the other is pretty set in stone. I don't have to vote Labour this election if I don't want to. But we'll see. We'll see. I'll make my mind up at some point. But yes, I strongly recommend all people to go register. Let me see. Tories have ran out of money for online campaigning, says Pterodax. Apollo says, for the most part, apart from immigration, constitutional reform, TV license scrap, and apart from those few months Boris raised tax to pay for social care by 1.5p on national insurance, the Tory 2019 manifesto delivered. Oh, see, that's a heady thing to be getting into when I'm just doing a quick little stream on my phone here, because there's a lot of things to look at in terms of the Tory 2019 manifesto. For the most part, apart from immigration, constitutional reform, TV license scrapping, and Tory manifesto. Okay, well, in which case then, if we look at, I think they pledged about a certain number of new police officers. I think they did that, perhaps. As far as house building goes, not so sure if they got that one. Levelling up's debatable, isn't it? Because there's no disputing that there are parts of the country, some red wall parts of the country as well, that have received money for stuff as a result of the whole levelling up pledge and everything. That's money that they got that they probably wouldn't have got otherwise. So you can't, in a sense, say that there are areas that haven't benefited from the levelling up agenda. But if you look at sort of the wider picture of what levelling up was meant to represent, actually, it doesn't seem like there's that significant a difference really in the country and the inequality in different parts of the country as well. But I'm not sitting here to comment one way or another on how closely the Tories managed to implement the manifesto at the moment. That's one for me to consider at a time where I've got more time to consider it and a computer in front of me to look some things up. Lee Hannum says, Reform, I understand, have the most TikTok followers, I hear. I can't verify that one way or another, but if it wouldn't surprise me if it were the case. They've got quite a good social media game. Damn it, Swiss. Stream sniping Farage. You're going to cost the Tories the election at this rate, says Liberty Prime. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't schedule, NA says 1% between the Tories. Oh, 1% between the Tories and Reform in the latest poll. Tories on 18, Reform on 17. Is that the same pollster that had them 2 points apart before, or is this a different pollster? That's a question I'd be interested to know. So it is getting closer. Little John UK says, I'm now a Reform Labour floating voter. See, look, some of them do exist out there on the fence between the two of them. Pterodax says, I'm voting Labour, though there is an outside chance of going Reform. Vote Labour. This country deserves a better class of government. Lee Hannum says Darlington. Um, and Heath Starmer said, "I'm going to give it to them." What's Darlington in reference to? I might need to ask. I mean, there's the, don't get me wrong, there's the anti-establishment populist in me that still lives in there, buried a little bit deeper than he once was, but he's still there. He still resonates with certain things, and there is a little bit of me that occasionally goes, "Oh, wouldn't it be really, just fuck you, fuck the reform there, have a slice of that." But I know better than that. I know better than that. It runs so contrary to what a lot of my views and beliefs are. And as much as I enjoy Farage as a character and as a person on the political stage, I can't willingly ignore the fact that he's so closely allied to the likes of Donald Trump, a person who refused to accept the results of a democratic election in his own country, that it just puts him beyond the pale, I'm afraid. As much as with a great degree of curiosity and just general popcorn munching, I'm quite excited to see Reform smash the Tories. I couldn't stray myself into that Labour Reform swing territory myself. Um, it's leveled up. I see. I see. Lee Hallam says Darlington. It's leveled up. Thank you, Lee. Are you standing as an indie again? Says Little John UK. I'm not in this election. And funnily enough, I heard that this is the election with the most candidates ever, apparently, with the most recent record being 2010. But no, I'm not one of them this time round. But you know, partly it's because I don't live in Stoke-on-Trent anymore. If I still lived in Stoke-on-Trent, there's a much stronger chance I probably would have ran again. I couldn't say for sure one way or another, but there's a much better chance I would have ran if I still lived in Stoke, still in the same constituency. But it didn't seem like a good fit, having moved up to North Tyneside in the northeast and just deciding, oh, it's another election, I better run for MP again, when I've had such a different relationship with this part of the country. Stoke, I at least had a sense of, okay, I've got a feel for Stoke. I've lived here a few years. I can think of a few things I'd want to do differently around here. But it's not quite the same for where I live at the moment. Um, Apollo TD says, for the first time, Tories in 2019 attempted to reverse the decline in Midlands and northern towns. Success varies. If Labour was in government, Red Wall never would have been thought. Thankfully, now it's a combo. Fair point. Fair point. Lee Hallam says the 1% is the YouGov, but the others has had it at 2, though the range is quite big. A poll in Wales has Reform and Conservatives level on 18%. Yes, I saw that poll from Wales. Interesting. Pterodax says Tories are already being treated like a third or fourth party. They're going to have to get used to being a small party given the state of play currently. And A adds it's a different pollster. Redfield and Wilton had that a 2% difference. YouGov putting them on 1% apart. Okay, then. So 2 pollsters now having them on either 2% or 1% apart. I think there's a pretty fair chance that in a week's time we see that parity or crossover. Apollo TD says big up Gullis. Little John says Stockport constituency, there'll be no activity. Labour 10k ahead and Tories slid 1% in 2019. Apollo adds Kidsgrove Pump Track and Kidsgrove Sports Centre reopened thanks to Boristown deal, Gullis and Newcastle under Lyme Council. Well, look, you can see that it's just as well I'm not running. I would have been in some stiff competition, would I not? Anyhow, I'm gonna call it a day there, guys. I just kind of wanted to pop in and mention a couple of things from the last few days. As I say, there's going to be and he says, "Are you going to watch the 7-way leaders debate tomorrow?" I expect so. Yeah. I think you can pretty much expect that, unless by some really strange quirk I've somehow missed the fact that a leaders debate is going on. I will always watch them. If they're Sunak Starmer ones, or if they're lots of the main party leaders, then I'll be checking them out. Yeah, and I think the next Sunak Starmer fixture is like, it's not a head-to-head debate, but it's one of them gets asked some questions, then the other one gets asked some questions, and that's the thing. But yeah, I'll be checking that out. Drew adds reasons not to vote Tory: scurvy, polluted waters, and NHS crumbling. NA adds, it's Thursday, actually, my mistake, when that debate is. Oh, also a general election in France now, says Pterodax. Yes, that's been interesting from the last couple of days, hasn't it? The first lot of European Union elections that have taken place without us being present for them, and it completely snuck up on me. Basically, I think because because we're not voting in them, it's not broadcast as much otherwise. But yeah, apparently a good night for the centre right, also a good night for sort of the hard right and the far right. Pretty much everyone else kind of getting squeezed a little bit is the takeaway I've had from it. Although, um, I guess what you would call the centre ground across the EU, be it centre left to centre right, they still hold sort of the majority, or they can have sort of a say on who the commission president is or what have you. But yeah, yeah, interesting set of results there. I remember me and Tom had a discussion um, on stream within the past week or so where he was talking about the rise or fall of certain like hard right or far right parties and movements across the world at the moment, and how some were falling back in some places and pushing forwards in others. So it'll be interesting to see what his take on the EU elections is um, in the wake of all that. Um, the seven-way one on the BBC was good. What were your thoughts on it? Says Na. Um, probably you want to watch the earlier part of this stream if you missed it for me to share my thoughts on it. But in a nutshell, I thought obviously Farage kind of stole the show because of course he did. It's Nigel Farage. I wish that Angela Rayner had been a bit better, but I still think she did better than Penny Mordaunt, which I suppose is the important thing. And the Lib Dem and the Greens were all right. And being a typical Englishman, I probably didn't pay enough attention to the Welsh and Scottish party people. Um, Anyhow, here's me saying that I'll end the stream, and then I don't. Apollo says Labour manifesto launched Thursday. Wonder if there'll be any rabbits or new taxes, e.g., would increase capital gains tax on second home purchases. Rabbits is an interesting one, isn't it? Because they've played things so safely up until this point. Even kind of you know rubbing off the edges, any sharp edges of their own policies that they thought, might have been an attack line against them. They've got rid of to the point that the main Tory attack line is, Labour will cost you £2,000 in tax or whatever. But whether there will be any surprises in their manifesto, I look forward to seeing. I don't think there'll be anything groundbreaking. I don't think there's some big, amazing, wonderful policy that I'm going to jump for joy that they're going to implement that we've not heard anything about up until this point. So in that sense, there won't be any rabbits, I guess. But there might be a couple things, a handful of things here and there that I go, okay, I wasn't aware of that. I might like that. We'll see. We'll see. Um, Anyway, guys, right, yeah, that is me going. You've had the better part of half an hour out of me. That's not too bad. But I will be checking out more leaders' debates, as I imagine you guys will, and the manifestos. And this evening, I will be taking a look at what some of the Tory tax cut plans are, because I know that there's quite a bit of buzz going on about that. So I'll find out what's happening. Anyway, you guys take care. Drop the stream a like if you've enjoyed it. I'll see you all later on. Probably next time, back on the laptop with the headset. Ta-ta.